The nation's main international airport, San Oscar Romero, became the staging ground for a major humanitarian operation on October 31st, 2025. At dawn, teams of rescue workers, medical personnel, soldiers and firefighters gathered on the tarmac, preparing to board an aircraft loaded with supplies bound for Jamaica. Their mission, to assist the Caribbean nation after Hurricane Melissa left a trail of destruction across the island. The operation was ordered directly by President Nayib Bukele, who authorized the deployment of specialized emergency units to support Jamaica's relief efforts. The move followed Kingston's declaration of a national emergency on October 28th, after the storm made landfall with sustained winds exceeding 150 kilometers per hour, triggering widespread flooding and infrastructure damage. At the airport, a steady stream of uniformed personnel, men and women from El Salvador's Civil Protection Agency, the Armed Forces, and the National Fire Department boarded the aid aircraft. Among them were medical teams, paramedics, and search and rescue specialists. They carried with them the Salvadoran flag, symbolizing solidarity with a nation struggling to recover from one of the strongest storms in recent Caribbean history. The mission represents one of the largest international humanitarian deployments ever conducted by El Salvador. According to officials, more than 300 personnel were mobilized, along with tons of emergency supplies, including food, bottled water, medicines, and rescue equipment. Fire Department Chief Baltazar Solano described the team's readiness and expertise. We are deploying a contingent of more than 300 highly trained personnel in different areas, rescue in collapsed structures, confined spaces, fast-moving waters, and floods. In other words, it is a highly select team with all the medical and paramedical capabilities to provide that assistance. As Solano spoke, members of his department prepared their specialized gear, helmets, harnesses, and protective suits, while handlers guided trained search dogs toward the aircraft's cargo hold. The inclusion of canine rescue units highlights the mission's focus on locating survivors who may be trapped in debris or isolated communities in Jamaica's hardest-hit parishes. Civil Protection Director Luis Amaya emphasized the moral significance of the deployment. Today, we are witnessing an action that reflects the highest values of the Salvadoran people: solidarity, brotherhood, and commitment to those who need it most. His words were met with applause from volunteers and soldiers assembled on the runway, many of whom had previously served in disaster relief operations across Central America and the Caribbean. Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs Adriana Mira, who oversaw the departure ceremony, presented the national flag to one of the lead rescue coordinators. In her remarks, she reaffirmed the government's diplomatic and humanitarian commitment. Jamaica is a friend of El Salvador. It is a nation with which we share ties. And so when they declared a state of emergency on October 28th due to the storm, President Bukele did not hesitate for a second to cooperate. El Salvador is currently playing that role of offering cooperation. The ceremony combined logistical precision with symbolic gestures of partnership. Soldiers stood in formation as containers of aid supplies, including medical kits, food parcels, and emergency water rations, were loaded into the aircraft. Rows of bottled water, tightly wrapped in clear plastic, filled the cargo bay, while boxes marked with civil protection insignia were stacked and secured. Officials confirmed that the operation was coordinated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in collaboration with El Salvador's Armed Forces, the Ministry of the Interior, and the General Directorate of Civil Protection. The aircraft, a military transport plane equipped for rapid response missions, was scheduled to land in Kingston later the same day. In addition to emergency teams, the deployment includes field doctors, nurses, and paramedics trained in crisis response. Their primary tasks will be to provide medical assistance to displaced residents, restore access to clean water, and help local authorities clear debris in affected urban and rural zones. Hurricane Melissa, which struck Jamaica earlier in the week, caused extensive damage to housing, electricity networks, and transportation routes. Heavy rainfall triggered flash floods in the parishes of St. Elizabeth, Manchester, and Clarendon, while strong winds uprooted trees and destroyed coastal infrastructure. Initial reports from Jamaican authorities estimated that thousands of residents had been displaced, with emergency shelters set up in schools and community centres. The Jamaican government's appeal for international support prompted swift responses from regional partners, including the Organization of American States and neighboring Latin American countries. El Salvador's contribution stands out for the scale of its deployment, reflecting the country's growing role in regional disaster response networks. President Bukele's government has in recent years invested in strengthening national rescue capabilities. Civil protection units have received updated equipment for search and rescue operations, flood response, and post-earthquake recovery. The decision to send these assets abroad underscores El Salvador's willingness to extend its capabilities beyond its borders in moments of humanitarian need. The departing personnel in San Luis Talpa represented multiple sectors of Salvadoran emergency services. Members of the Army's engineering corps stood beside firefighters, paramedics, and logistics specialists. A few carried handheld radios and notebooks, coordinating with the Mission Command Center established at the airport. Before boarding, they conducted final checks of supplies, oxygen tanks, power generators, medical tents, and portable communication systems. Photographs captured during the departure showed the Deputy Foreign Minister posing with the team, standing before the aid plane painted with national insignia. Behind them, containers labelled Ayuda Humanitaria El Salvador were secured in preparation for takeoff. Officials noted that this deployment would operate under Jamaica's National Emergency Management Agency once on site, ensuring full coordination with local authorities and international relief organisations. Salvadoran teams will focus primarily on search and rescue operations in the southern coastal areas and medical relief in temporary shelters. The operation also demonstrates the regional integration of disaster relief strategies in the Caribbean basin. In recent years, El Salvador has participated in joint training exercises with neighbouring countries through mechanisms such as the Coordination Center for the Prevention of Natural Disasters in Central America and the Dominican Republic, known as CEPRIDENAC. Those exercises have enhanced coordination for rapid deployment during hurricanes, floods and earthquakes. For many of the personnel on board, this mission is both familiar and new. Several firefighters and soldiers have participated in previous international operations, including relief efforts in Guatemala, Honduras, and the Dominican Republic. But the deployment to Jamaica marks one of the longest-range humanitarian missions in Salvadoran history. From a logistical perspective, the operation required close collaboration between multiple ministries. The Foreign Ministry handled diplomatic arrangements, while the Defence Ministry provided air transport and security. The Ministry of Health coordinated the medical teams and ensured the safe transport of vaccines, antibiotics and surgical supplies. As the engines roared to life on the runway, officials and families waved farewell to the departing team. The sound of the aircraft taking off symbolised El Salvador's contribution to regional solidarity, a tangible act of assistance from one nation to another in crisis. Inside the plane, rows of uniformed personnel sat alongside stacked boxes of aid. Among them were canine handlers and their dogs, trained for search operations in collapsed buildings. Their mission would begin within hours of landing in Jamaica, where local authorities continued to assess damage and prioritise emergency zones. According to preliminary estimates from the Jamaican government, Hurricane Melissa's passage left hundreds injured and caused severe infrastructure losses in multiple regions. Power lines were down, roads were blocked, and several hospitals were operating at limited capacity. International assistance, including from the United Nations and Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, began arriving in the days following the storm. El Salvador's deployment adds a specialised rescue component to these ongoing relief efforts. The inclusion of structural engineers and water rescue experts aims to complement Jamaica's national teams, particularly in areas still inaccessible due to flooding. In an interview before boarding, Fire Department Chief Baltazar Solano reiterated that the Salvadoran team was equipped for diverse emergency scenarios. Their tools include sonar equipment for locating trapped individuals, inflatable boats for flood rescues, and mobile first aid stations for triage operations. The Civil Protection Agency confirmed that its personnel would remain in Jamaica for as long as necessary, depending on the evolution of recovery operations. Coordination with Jamaica's Ministry of Local Government and Community Development will determine the length and scope of El Salvador's contribution. The Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs highlighted that this mission is not only a humanitarian response, but also a reaffirmation of bilateral ties. El Salvador and Jamaica maintain diplomatic relations marked by cooperation in regional forums, trade and cultural exchange. The aid mission, officials say, reinforces those links through direct action in a moment of need. At the San Luis Talpa Air Base, the sense of purpose was evident. Soldiers carried crates of medical equipment, paramedics organised stretchers, and firefighters checked their gear one final time. Each step of the operation reflected precision, training and coordination, hallmarks of El Salvador's expanding disaster response capacity. The government emphasised that all deployed personnel are fully insured, vaccinated and equipped for international missions. Upon arrival in Jamaica, the team would undergo a joint briefing with local authorities to identify priority zones for intervention. El Salvador's rapid response was praised by regional observers who noted the country's efficient mobilisation of resources within 48 hours of Jamaica's emergency declaration. The coordination involved both public institutions and private donors, contributing food and medical supplies to the relief effort. As the humanitarian aircraft ascended into the sky, the image of the Salvadoran flag waving from the tarmac captured the spirit of solidarity driving this mission. For the hundreds of personnel on board, their task ahead was clear: to deliver aid, restore safety, and stand with the people of Jamaica in their recovery from Hurricane Melissa. By late afternoon, reports confirmed the successful arrival of the Salvadoran delegation in Kingston. Reception teams from Jamaica's government and international agencies met the flight, directing cargo unloading and personnel assignments. The first group of Salvadoran rescue workers immediately travelled to Clarendon Parish, one of the hardest-hit regions. From collapsed bridges to flooded communities, their work began amid challenging conditions. Yet their training and experience positioned them to make a meaningful impact, providing medical assistance, clearing roads, and supporting reconstruction. The mission marks a milestone in El Salvador's international humanitarian outreach. It reflects both the nation's growing disaster response infrastructure and its commitment to regional cooperation. In the words of Civil Protection Director Luis Amaya, solidarity, brotherhood and commitment define the essence of this operation. Those principles continue to guide El Salvador's presence on the ground in Jamaica as relief efforts expand in the days ahead. The humanitarian mission remains ongoing, with Salvadoran teams assisting in flood response, logistics coordination and medical care. Further updates from both governments are expected as assessments continue. For now, the operation stands as a clear example of regional unity, a moment when one nation's preparedness becomes another's lifeline. El Salvador's deployment to Jamaica, comprising more than 300 trained personnel and tons of essential supplies, underscores the country's growing role in international humanitarian assistance following Hurricane Melissa's devastation.